and he's had the opportunity to design and deeply, to design multiple environments in both large and small throughout his career. He has worked with organizations spanning multiple geographic regions and has helped design the infrastructure that tie them together. At Animal Logic, his team have deployed the Vancouver studio and completed several feature productions like Lego Movie 2, and are working on the latest feature production with Warner Brothers called DC Super Pets to release in the May of 2021. And finally, Nick Alivato. Nick has been in IT for 20 years and in the entertainment industry for 10 years. He lives and breathes full stack automation and loves development. He's worked with pipeline artists, developers, producers, and owners to bridge the gap between people and technology. He carries active cloud certification, designs infrastructures, and loves writing small, that is very small, web applications in his spare time. And thank you all very much for joining us, and thank you three for joining us for this important conversation. So Nick, I'm going to hand this off to you now. Now, do you want to start us off by telling us a little bit more about yourself and how you got into data analytics in M&E?
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, everybody. Thanks for the time to speak. My name's Nick. I've been an infrastructure engineer for, as mentioned, 20 plus years at this point. I have a heavy server operations background, and when I got into media and entertainment, there was a transition occurring towards automation, data analytics, and things related. So it was a natural fit for my style of IT. I prefer very organized, disciplined practice, and moving the focus of IT away from the day-to-day challenges and aligning it towards the business goals. And so analytics and automation helps us not worry about a lot of the things that we used to have to worry about, which lets us focus on the production, on the content, and on the end result for the user, which is our ultimate customer.
Awesome, thank you. What about you, Arash? You want to tell a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So I've been in IT for over 20 years, and in media entertainment for about 15. All 15 of those have been in management and or design and implementation roles. And Animal Logic I've been for about 5 years, and the benefit of this facility was that we got to build a very large environment from the ground up, replicating what our sister company in Australia, Sydney, Australia, had done for over 25 years. But then really start getting into the redevelopment of it, better automation, better metric management, better workflows. And that's really where we're starting to strive towards now. And in the last few years, we've really started moving towards a hybrid cloud kind of an architecture. So automation is definitely key in being able to achieve it. It requires a lot more redevelopment of our core infrastructure to be able to operate it. And that's, I guess, where a lot of organizations like ours are starting to go towards. It's about getting the additional resources and capabilities that you would want, but how do you maintain them, which is, I think, the biggest challenge that everybody has.
Awesome, thank you. All right, Greg, I'm actually going to let you introduce yourself, and why don't you take over this discussion?
Yeah, sure thing. Thanks, Dan. Yeah, so myself, I've been doing technology and media for my whole career, going way back, 20 plus years, but time flies. But more to the point, what I'm seeing for analytics and automation, look, I work for Dell Technologies, and we're like the granddaddy of on-prem infrastructure, right? And so what we're seeing is now that all of my customers, everyone I'm dealing with is moving to this hybrid architecture of some on-prem, some in the cloud, somewhere in between, private colos, all those sorts of things. And in order to be able to effectively make that work, it has to be seamless. And the only way to do that is through automation, and analytics, right? So you need to understand, what your data is, where things are moving, what resources are needed where, and then you need to automate how that's going to get deployed across your infrastructure, whether that's on-prem or in the cloud or a little bit of both. So that's kind of where I see this stuff. But yeah, let's kick things off. I guess, talking to you, Arash, like where, in automation has been a thing for a while, right? This isn't new. But I think that it has definitely evolved quite a lot in recent years, and quite a lot in the past, say, 6 months. so where do you see like automation in the modern media pipeline, like, you know, what you live and breathe every day? You know, where does that fit? Where do you see it going?
So it's a very interesting question because yes, it has existed for a very long time. You know, we automated user creations and automated deployments and permission layers, and it kind of started off obviously for everyone as a way to control your environment and change within your environment. But what it started doing was defining workflows and the benefits of increasing and higher performing workflows. One of the biggest challenges I know I've had in most of the industries or environments I've worked is if they've had a predefined environment set, workflows were developed against it, and that made it super challenging to make change to. Automation is really the benefit of being able to cut through that. You can start taking what you currently have and stop the hand rolling of any of the implementations that you do. Obviously, you need the analytics, like you mentioned. You need to have better understanding of the workflows, especially when you start growing in scale. So when you're in an environment that has you know, multi-geographic regions with high latency, so Animal Logic has that big challenge where we deal with minimum 200 millisecond latency between our sister studio. And for some studios or some environments, that's not really a thing because data is isolated or your designs are isolated. You're designing for one site versus another. But if you really want to be able to take advantage of all the great work that gets done within the talent, the development, the tools and chains and everything that gets built for it, everything needs to be of one standard. And automation is the only way to have a change deployed everywhere. And one of the things that's been a great benefit for us in Animal Logic is every production that Vancouver has been involved in has been full animation. Obviously, a lot of data sets, a lot of custom developed pipeline tools, and a lot of proprietary information built into it. But we've done it all multi-site. So it's not as simple as taking a slate, taking, you know, just a piece of a shot, a visual effects piece of it, and trying to do it in another site. We've actually had to synchronize the entire pipeline between the multiple different studios. And that's when we really started digging into the heavy automation. We have really good, talented people. There's a lot of data flowing back and forth, and it's really the only way for us to keep track of where everything is and take advantage of that, of those opportunities.
Yeah, no, for sure, that makes sense. So Nick, you know, tossing it over to you, you know, you with GPL, like you see a lot of different environments and have certainly seen things evolve over the course of over the years and certainly recently. So where do you see this evolving? Like what's changing and like what are the tools that you're using now, you know, Ansible, maybe Terraform, those kinds of things. What does that look like for you in your day-to-day?
Sure, yeah. So similar to what Arash said, we have a multi-site challenge as well. We're not a single organization that deals with multiple sites. We're an organization that deals with multiple customers that may have multiple sites. So that scale for us assists when moving between contexts between those sites. So for example, you know, we put in Dell switch stacks for our hybrid for our customers, and we provision those entire stacks using automation tooling, Ansible, as you mentioned. And so that provides us with consistency. It provides us with consistency across deployments, across units of the switch stack itself. But then if we have multiple customers that have similar configurations, there's equity there for us as well. And so any multi-site architecture, I think, has to have automation wrapped around it to be successful at all. A single site, I also think, should have the automation because it's going to be that much simpler for the team to maintain over time. Culturally, I think I've seen the biggest shift I think everybody's seen the biggest shift in the last 6 months, but I've seen a bigger shift in the last few years as well, with people like Arash taking the reins on projects and taking lead and bringing in these initiatives, pairing it with other technical talent that can read and write that infrastructure code, whether it be Terraform or Ansible, anything like that. That is an accelerant. That's like a 10x effect on the IT talent, enabling them to do what they would have done normally, but through automation tooling, lets them do what they do better, more effectively, and as Arash was saying, have more agility in what they do. So if there is some last minute change, which happens regularly, those changes can be, we have a framework to manage those changes. And that equity for us has been very helpful because we have service desk team members at service studios, provide level 1, level 2 support. And we're almost at the point where all 3 levels of support are handled through that tooling. You know, we have some package deployments for producers. We have VLAN configurations for certain projects that have security requirements and everything in between. So the cultural shift has been a big enabler and a big thing that we've seen because we have our foot in the door at many different studios. So we've seen management, owners and stakeholders, as well as engineers with their boots on the ground who have adopted this mindset in the last few years.
Yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. Now, you know, we touched, you know, a minute ago on why analytics is so critical for this. I guess, Arash, where, you know, data analytics is certainly a hot topic, and that's, you know, a big part of it. Certainly something near and dear to my heart with some of the tools that we have. But then, you know, I imagine you need analytics across your facility about things like, you know, render cores and all the rest. Like, how do you tie? Well, or what analytics metrics are most important to you today, and how has that changed? Like, where do you see that fit in your workflow, Arash?
So that's an ever-changing environment for us as far as I'm concerned. Obviously, the standards are, you know, syslog for everything and anything that's actually operating within your environment. When it comes to the metrics, it's all about the performance of every piece of hardware that you have if you're looking at a private, you know, privatized network. And then obviously expanding into, you know, multiple data centers and a distributed network, that becomes even more important. We utilize multiple different tools for that. So it's all about getting the right tool for the right job and making sure that you're not missing anything. The challenge is always piecing it all together. And now we're starting to see a lot of new organizations come up that help you centralize these things. Obviously, like in Animal, we've had you know, Zabbix for our metrics management and metrics collection. We've had Graylog and Elk Stacks for the logs collection and alerting. We've utilized you know, centralized SaaS-based services for alerting and notifications to try to get the team together when there is an event or some kind of a trigger. And one of the things that it's actually given us the benefit of is be able to give that same information to all of our developers and all of our production teams. So now it's no longer a technical team or an IT team that's dealing with like figuring out what the value of this data is, but the entire organization as a whole. And now we're starting to see trends come up. People are noticing performance hits. People are noticing you know, better optimizations that they can achieve within every single part of the pipeline. And that is, I think, one of the biggest value adds. For us, the metrics, as far as it goes, we should, in theory, be able to collect everything, as long as you're not worried about the data, the stack or the size of the data. But if you can collect it all and you have it available to you, then people start finding creative ways of utilizing it. When it comes to the value of it, obviously that's a ongoing thing. You have to constantly go through it and analyze it. You find trends, you find things that a user is doing within one part of the environment that's now related to performance. It's in a completely different site, completely different environment, and you wouldn't have been able to do or identify this easily if you didn't have this kind of framework built. And the other thing that it does for automation is it can instantly tell you if a change is worth its value or not. We have you know, Ansible-based testing and reviews kind of built into the automation. So as soon as a change is made within one of our OS frameworks or any of the application deployments, it'll get tested. And if it comes back with a negative response, you know, we'll instantly get notified and alerted on it. We'll see the breakage before it starts hitting the masses. And it'll go through its chain of, you know, pilot review, pilot testing, and then into the global rollout. With that, really you start understanding how to design the coding of infrastructure as code to eventually even put the intelligence into it. So if this happens, it'll automatically roll itself back. It'll notify the right team, the right developer, the right person who did the rollout, and it'll give them all the siloed information that they need to be able to analyze that. So hopefully within the next year or two, that's where we've gone and fully achieved it.
And I think that I mean, you touched on a lot of points there, right? In terms of like building compostable infrastructure and wrapping that around your, the decision-making processes of how you're rolling out changes, and that, all links back to understanding what's going on and so forth. Nick, I'm curious from your perspective, what are some of the like, workflow analysis and data analysis that you've seen that's been most valuable for the clients that you work with in your practice?
Sure. Yeah. So to kind of piggyback on what Arash was saying, putting the right systems in place to do the analytics itself is an operations challenge. So automation comes into play on delivering that service to the user. And by the user, we mean the team that's working on the show. And so one thing that we've seen is pipeline developers now are able to put more data into these systems like Elk Stacks or any of the other SaaS versions, and they're able to track things like per shot metrics, per asset like source files. They can get more information out of their work, and that allows them to then make better business decisions, better creative decisions, better decisions around IT, anything really. By condensing the amount of time and effort required to get these systems into the user's hands, they're then able to spend more time working on the value add, which is the analytics, collecting all the data, preening out the data that they don't need, and so forth. And so that's when, once you have everything under control is when you can start innovating. And innovation can be very simple, like custom dashboards for teams to look at to get that data that they do need to make a decision. Other things back to operations like system metrics, we can correlate things that normally couldn't be correlated before because we didn't have visibility onto it. At GPO, we have a managed service provider practice, and so we roll out consistent monitoring to our customers, and we have that automated. That takes something that maybe took a significant amount of time before and condensed it into a matter of minutes. And so that the ability to get the customer going with a turnkey solution like that lets then us turn around and present to them the value that we bring to the table, but then also let them use those monitoring tools to make sure that all their core systems are up and running. We put monitoring on licensing. We put that into a log server. We can track that metric just like any other metric. We can look at seats. We can look at render time. We can look at all the different angles of the studio and design the IT infrastructure accordingly. And then we can augment it with additional services that maybe they hadn't thought about because they were too consumed with doing the day-to-day tasks. So freeing the mind to do these higher level things is what automation brings to the table. I look at data analytics as part of that for this industry. It's big data was born some time ago. Media and entertainment was kind of one of the original big data industries, but there's many of them now. And so there's a cross-pollination of tools where we're bringing in tools that originated in other industries and as a standard, it's coming into the media industry. So I definitely see the enablement of automation to deliver the services being key to having a good data analytics practice in your environment.
Yeah, it's what's been interesting from my perspective is seeing how all these different APIs play together, right? In a past life of my own in the media asset management space, a number of years ago, we talked a lot about connecting APIs, and I think it's a thing that it's not new, but we're finally starting to see the fruits of all of those labors. I mean, what for the audience, what kind of brought this together is an open source tool that I've been involved with that should be coming down the pipe pretty soon here that connects Shotgun with the Dell DataIQ data analysis tool, and seeing how we can get value there. And that was kind of what drove all of this. But really seeing how all those APIs connect together to deliver this this automation. So I'm curious, shifting gears just a tiny bit, Arash, for yourself, like what might be interesting to some of the folks here, like what, for the guys that are on your team, how are the skill sets changing, in this? Like what are you really looking for, in terms of, the guys that are going to be running your infrastructure and manning this, right? Since so much of it is automated, how has that changed? And what are those skills that you think are critical in this new reality that we live in?
I think one of the things that's changed quite a lot within the way our teams are being structured out, and or the kind of training we give and the development that we make sure that everybody is focused on, is really starting to understand how to modularize your work, how to modularize the environment, and build multiple layers to anything and everything that you implement. From a skill set, obviously, Python is one of the biggest, I think, for anyone. Even if you're just focused on a specialty, I think that it helps you tie into a lot of things, Python, Java, and a lot of these very standardized programming languages, because that's what all of the ability to pull this data out after you've collected it and analyze it really depends on. And picking the right tools, right? Understanding the tools and figuring out how to better leverage them. We don't invent them. What we do is figure out how to put them in place better and how to get the benefits of them more. And with my team, I think one of the biggest things that we always look for is innovation. If a problem comes about, what are the multiple different ways that we can solve it? Because there's always a few, and being able to quickly cut down through the nitty gritty of it and going, this one is the best path forward for us. Here's how it will work into our environment, and here's how it fits that modularized model. If we need to pivot at any point, then it happens. You're more comfortable, right? Because you show that you understand your environment. It's actually easier to understand your environment when you're automated and you're deployed as infrastructure as code, because anybody can go through and read that code. Anybody can understand if a change made here will affect something counter on some other application or some other tool part of your environment. And that is something that historically was a big challenge for everyone. If somebody was a specialized network engineer and they were the only person that you could talk to about network engineering needs, either they got overwhelmed or you didn't know what change they actually implemented. And because you didn't have access to their logs or their metrics, you didn't even know if it was the best change or not. And it's not about finger pointing, it's about learning and figuring out your environment, right? Having that visibility, because if you make a change and it works, but it's not the best change, then you still can make another change to make it even better, right? And you can figure things out and improve your team's knowledge overall. The other thing it does definitely will help improve communication, because it itself is designed for notifying and alerting everyone of changes happening within your environment. Meaning that engineers can focus more on making the change rather than explaining what they've just done and how they've done it. And then focus on, more initiatives, more development, more future growth. And that's a big win for any organization, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the thing that you touched on there really is this idea of infrastructure as code and the compostable environments. And that's just, I guess that's the outgrowth of the cloud model. It's what we expect these days, and it just gives everyone the ability to pivot quickly and make those changes as needed, for sure. I guess we're coming towards the bottom of the hour to round it out. Nick, I'm curious from your perspective, like what, from a skill perspective, or what has changed for you, most recently, in terms of what has been most valuable for automation, and what you really needed to have mastered to move this forward for your clients.
Sure. Yeah, I agree. Python, that's a key language. More generally, I would say a DevOps practice or an understanding of development processes helps, again, from the operations side, because of what Arash was saying, is that there's a lot of visibility when those processes are practiced by the team. Anyone that's familiar with development knows what a pull request is, and so having your infrastructure in a feature branch, the feature you developed, doing a pull request that requires 2 senior or 2 team members to review, approve, and then you can merge the pull request into your main line. So those sort of workflows, understanding of that is almost a non-technical skill. It's more of a paperwork thing, but the understanding how that works is key, and the value that comes out of it. It's not the hardest thing to train with an employee, but seeing operations engineers being able to work with the development teams, where there used to be a wall between those teams, there were silos, and there'd be finger pointing, friction, things like that. Having everybody practicing DevOps, developer operations, allows for a more frictionless environment, and it gives users a consistent interface to look at the code and treat it as a mutually owned product, as opposed to a specialist that really only owns one domain. There's cross-domain knowledge that helps remove single point of failures, bus factor, things like that. Those are removed when the entire team is responsible for the result, but each person contributes where they contribute. They're still specialists, but they're not isolated from the rest of the team.
Right on. And that really, I think it frees people up to focus on innovation, right? If communication is good and those soft skills are rocking, and you understand, how all these pieces come together. Yeah, excellent. Well, why don't we kind of shift over and do a little bit of Q&A. We could go on this discussion for another 30 minutes easily, but let's see if there's some questions. Rupal, I believe you were gonna be our Q&A presenter. Please.
Hey, yes, thanks, Greg. Great discussion so far. Moving on to the questions from our audience. So the most upvoted one is, I know this was already touched upon briefly, like what are the most helpful analytics to collect, and what kind of impact did they have?
Arash, you wanna run with that one first?
Sure. Yeah, I was wondering who was gonna have a crack at it first.
Who's on first?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there's obviously a very basic analytic and/or metric and log type of information that you should be collecting regardless, right? It's the performance of your environment, the performance of the CPU network, and the memory consumption. And obviously from there, you start branching out into the different types of applications that you're running and the benefits that you get based on better understanding where you're at. With logs, it's really what kind of alerting did you want to set up for it? What kind of attention grab do you need to have from it? Obviously, for most of us, it started as a requirement to retain it for audit purposes. If you're going through a security audit, if you're trying to, get your MPA certification or TPN reviews done, but it really spans beyond that for the uses for it. When is a problem happening within your environment? When do you see notices where like your on-prem Exchange server is about to tip over because somebody has released a bad code and you're not aware of the amount of throughput that's going through it? These things are really where the value add comes in. And for performance, it's all about, like, a great example of what we did. We started getting complaints from users within our environments at one point that they were seeing network slowness. In reality, it was the filer was getting overwhelmed. The bad jobs were going into the farm, the compute farm, and it was just crushing the filer. Based on this, what we decided to kind of implement was a program where machines are automatically testing all of the different workflows within our environment. And that metric and that review became a big part of our dashboard build, where we could actually identify when performance hits were being affected across our entire network and our entire production line. Now that's obviously evolving into a much more robust and much more developed framework. But these are the types of things that really come in. So it's not what is the best. I don't really see it as what is the best kind of metric. All metrics are important. It's how you use them that really shows you the value.
Yeah, I have a little to add to that too.
Please.
Starting with, we see it as layers. We have our raw system metrics. Those are CPU, disk, RAM, network, those things. We have application level metrics. Then we have user level metrics. Then we have job level metrics. Out of those categories, we can usually find a place to group some metric or another. But we go into the engagement with the customer saying, you can't improve what you're not measuring. And so, as Arash just said, every metric is important because there needs to be an improvement on it at some point in the future. It might not be an immediate one. It might not be a very low-hanging fruit. It might not be a priority at that moment. But having the ability to measure that network performance in a cohesive way allows then that monitoring to be a metric itself. And so having that new order of metric is really, in his environment or our customer's environment, it's a custom metric for their environment that sews together all of the other metrics below it. And so the ability for them to abstract out a correlation between, like he was saying, a filer versus the network, that allows them to measure their service delivery for their customers and then improve it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and I think just to kind of touch on something Nick said, we do collect a lot more than we actually use, right? And the idea is that it helps you find trends even in your short-term historicals if you can't retain much, but it's really found its value for us where we can identify that it is a correlation of something that's been happening over a few months, and sometimes it happens once a month. It's very difficult to put your finger on things like that unless if you're collecting metrics that you were never thought were valuable, but become a key part of fixing problems within your environment.
Yeah, for sure. If I would add, anything to that, I think it's, you've got all of this data coming in. Arash, to your point, you're collecting a lot more data than you're using. Nick, to your point, you can't improve anything that you don't measure. But that can be quite overwhelming, and I think that's where the understanding what for a particular environment are the important bits, and there's not an answer for that. I mean, if there was an answer for that, none of us would have jobs. But understanding what's going on in that environment, pulling all that data in, and understanding where to look. Yeah, I mean, some of that is just the weight of experience, I think, for some places, but certainly. Well, that's why we're talking about it. Rupal, is there another one?
Yeah, talking about the amount of data, like there's a question about the UI practices that you can follow to create an effective solution to represent this complex data. And clubbing another one is, what are the most effective ways to present your data?
I would say dashboarding, visualizing the data, correlating some things that are not directly correlated in logs. You can look at the code of the matrix, so to speak. You can have all the data collected, but attaching a dashboard solution on top of it that looks at the key data points and presents that to you over time allows you to then understand it at a macro and a micro level, sort of in one pane of glass. You can see trends and things.
Absolutely. That's and for as far as tools, obviously there's multiple different tools that you can utilize. We ourselves use Grafana very heavily. Spans across our entire organization. Everyone in the company has access to it. So the data is really the value of it's available to everyone, and they can all create the dashboards as they need or see fit. And the knowledge sharing from it is actually, I think, one of the biggest values you get, because if another member of my development team has developed a dashboard that's similar to mine, and we start finding discrepancies, that sometimes leads us down the path of, well, how are you measuring your the same data? Like, how are you visualizing it compared to what we're doing, and are we all within alignment on it? We have found values in things like that as well.
I have another to add too, is once you have the logging and the dashboarding and the data is in a clean and presentable way, it can then be pushed into other tools. A lot of what we see, some people like to call it chat ops, which I don't like too much, but that's okay. it's exposing those pieces of information to users. We can do everything is an API request basically. So we can take a snapshot of that data at a certain time when a certain alarm hits, and we can get that data in front of the person that needs to see it right away. Also, I wanted to add too, it also helps a lot proving that things are working as expected. And so there's a lot of value in having metrics, even if nothing, no alarms are triggering, even if nothing is wrong. There might be a user that reports something and they sort of misreport it. And so it can help keep the team on track a little bit more clearly, knowing that the environment is self-monitoring, maybe doing even a little bit of self-healing like auto-scaling and things like that. Those are all technologies, things that are enabled by monitoring metrics and the data that comes from it.
I think you just have a bunch of windows open and tail the logs and just watch the command lines go by.
Yeah, kind of like
I think we
Matrix.
used to. Yeah.
I think that Nick actually touched on a pretty important point, which probably covers a couple of other questions that are up there. But the biggest thing that's a value add from those kinds of dashboards, those kinds of alerting and or notification to the right individuals, is it reduces the investigative work required to identify when a problem is happening, the scale of the problem, getting the more and more of your team involved if they need to be. These things are all value adds to a business. If, like Nick mentioned, a user is having a problem, you can instantly identify, is it just the one-off for that user, or is it your entire department, or is it the entire production line that's actually suffering? And this kind of breakdown should instantly eliminate the noise and take it to another level and go, these three things just alerted, but now you got the number, like, ignore them all. Your bigger problem is actually here. This is part of your network that's actually having a problem. Your core is having an issue, or any other part of the environment that's the focal point.
Awesome. Den, do we have time for one more question? Do we got to wrap it up? What's the word, man?
Can we do a quick one?
Sure, RuPaul, fire it off.
Yeah, the next one is about automation, and what are some easy areas you think are targets for automation, and what was the favorite process that you automated?
Oh, favorite. I love doing switch deployments because I spent so many years in my Cisco days, CCNA, doing it manually. And so the ability to interface it with it through Ansible or any other deployment technology is my favorite. In terms of low-hanging fruit, honestly, the next thing that you have to deploy or configure, now is a good time to start. So what the business needs in the next week or two or month, consider automating that, because you have to start somewhere. If there's a big project, a deployment, a new initiative, new gear, anything that provides an opportunity to take away the time required to do that, you might as well get that time investment now and get your foot in the door, start understanding the technology, because the team members ultimately have to maintain it. And so affording them, whether it's you or your team members, the opportunity to do something, especially a new deployment, is good. Yeah, any server, any switch, anything that comes in, look into bringing in a piece of automation to handle that. Be my recommendation.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Well said.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's a great way to end it. I really want to thank Greg and Arash and Nick. This was a fantastic discussion. I had to hang back and let Greg take it because he just had so many fantastic questions, and I think he really did a fantastic job leading it. So I want to thank you, Greg, for making such a great discussion. And of course, thank everybody in the audience for joining us for this panel. We really appreciate you coming, and we really look forward to doing more panels like this. Now, coming up next, we have a short break. So join us in High Fidelity for a little while. Maybe Greg and Arash and Nick will join over there. And if you've got more questions, we'll see if we can sneak them into High Fidelity. But if not, please join us in about 20 minutes for the 2020 Pipeline Awards, starting at 2 p.m. Pacific time. Again, thank you all. Thank you to Greg. Thank you to Arash. Thank you to Nick. And of course, thank you to Rupal for reading the questions. And thank you, everybody, for writing such fantastic questions. Have a great day.
Everybody.
Take it easy, guys. Thanks a lot.
Thanks everyone.
Bye-bye.